Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for what's set to be an incredible talk about the future of fashion creativity. My name is Rachel Arthur, and I'm one of the co-founders of FashMash. For those of you who don't know us, we are a members-only network aiming to encourage dialogue and sharing of ideas to shape the future of fashion. We began as a tiny London-based drinks event obsessed with everything to do with digital innovation now 9 years ago. Today, we are focused on change makers in every single sense of the word, and a myriad of different tools and events that help facilitate that. Whether it's about the sustainable revolution or what's happening with new technologies, not to mention your own career paths. Pioneers, then, our event tonight is our flagship interview series, focusing on, indeed, the pioneering leaders within the sector. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, let me first say thank you to our sponsor for the evening, Klaviyo, an e-commerce marketing platform supporting brands such as Heist, Hummingbird Bakery, and Living Proof. Whether you're an entrepreneur just starting out or part of a marketing team at a multinational brand, Klaviyo aims to give you everything you need to create memorable marketing moments through email, text, and personalized web experiences. We highly recommend you give it a go. Just visit klaviyo.com/fashmash for your free trial. We're also really thrilled to be supporting Southall Black Sisters this month, a charity that aims to highlight and challenge all forms of gender-related violence against women. We always support an organisation of our speaker's choice, which means we've been able to contribute to an incredible variety of different causes since the pandemic began. So thank you all for your contributions. They're hugely appreciated. If you haven't donated tonight and you'd like to thank Sarah for her time, please head to the Eventbrite page where you'll still be able to do so after this evening's event. Right, now on to the main event itself. We know the past 12 months have been completely transformative for fashion. The question is, what of these changes are here to stay and what's next? Fresh from a month of digital shows from New York to Paris, Sarah Mower MBE is perhaps one of the best placed people to share her take on what is disrupting the sector. Where the catwalk was once the ultimate communication of a designer's vision, a new generation of talent is approaching things differently. And Sarah is at the forefront of discovering such emerging creatives. She is chief critic for Vogue and an advocate for emerging designers and art and design education. Having served as the British Fashion Council Ambassador for Emerging Talent since 2009, Sarah heads the New Gen Committee and works with the BFC education programs to broaden inclusion, provide scholarships and mentoring to students in the UK. She's written a number of books about the industry and is also a visiting professor at Central St Martin's, an honorary fellow at the Royal College of Art, and holds 2 honorary doctorates. On top of that, she is an advisor to the LVMH Prize for Young Designers. For those of you joining us tonight, don't forget to also participate via social media. You can do so via the hashtag FashMash, and do pop any questions you might have in the Q&A box here for us to ask Sarah at the end. Without further ado, then, it is my pleasure to welcome both Sarah and my co-founder Rosanna to our virtual stage. If you would like to both please turn your videos on.
Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome, Sarah. I am so thrilled to be joined by Sarah this evening. I am a long-time admirer of Sarah's writing. And I have to say, I don't know if Sarah knows this, but when I first met her over a decade ago at the British Fashion Council, I was a little bit awestruck for quite a few weeks. So it's a delight now to be able to really get into the essence of fashion creativity, and what a year in which to discuss that. Sarah, to begin, I actually wanted to kick off with some words from your recent review of the Central St Martin's MA show for Vogue Runway. A sentence that you said here, I highlighted in my boldest color. You mentioned, what happens to fashion creativity when all bets are off and all the parameters of present and future are suddenly compressed into the space of your bedroom with just a few zooms into other people's cloistered worlds? In light of those words and the emerging talents, what has happened? What's your take on it?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and hi to everybody who's here. Yeah, I mean, this past year has been incredibly humbling and salutary, and very, very inspiring, because I mean, as you said in that sentence that I wrote a couple of days ago, everything is open now to question. The whole industry is open to question. As far as young talent's concerned, I'm seeing things which are incredibly positive, as well as, you know, I mean, the sadness and the loneliness of being alone as a young creative person working in your bedroom. It might be your student digs, or you know, in your parents' garage even. Those pressures have been huge. However, what's coming out of it is something really extraordinary in so many different directions. I'm seeing that. Sorry, I made some notes. I'm seeing that it sounds hideous to say the benefits of the pandemic, but the benefits of not going at such a breakneck speed as we were doing before, having time to concentrate and really focus on why you're doing what you're doing. And probably that's something that everybody in the industry has come up against. But also those benefits have been that not having the pressure to show and to you know, to spend so much money on a catwalk show, and meanwhile pivot to direct to consumer, and also concentrate on communicating. These things are emerging all over the place. I mean, I'm talking to designers. We just talked about Sandra St. Martin's, the young woman who won the L'Oreal Prize of the Year. I interviewed her in Iceland. She's been designing in Iceland on her own for I mean, for a good past a year, and has said it was very positive because she didn't have the distractions. And who else have I? There's a designer called Palomo Spain who's in Cordoba, doing incredibly well in the community there, using all the community resources. There's a guy called Ludovic de Saint-Senan who's in Paris. I mean, all of these people have done incredibly well compared to how they might have be doing a year ago. Oh yes, and God, I'm so sorry. Stephen Cook. People who are actually now know who exactly their customers are, and they're talking to them, and they're getting orders through DM and their own website. So these things probably would not have happened had it been business as usual. Yeah. You know, in 2019.
Yeah. And do you think in many ways this generation are better equipped to cope with the crisis that's taken place, or whichever way we look at it, it might not be a crisis for everyone, but the repercussions of the last year, are they better equipped than any generation before to deal with that?
Well, of course, I mean, the big blessing is the communication is there, and they, you know, people are making, you know, films on their iPhones. You don't have to have an enormous amount of equipment or money to communicate. So this sort of decentralization, which I think is, you know, one of those, it's not a trend, it's a fact that's happening, is to their advantage. So absolutely, yeah, it's you know, and I think something else that's happened is that in general, this kind of glossy and distant idea of what fashion is has kind of broken down, and anything that looks kind of fake and pretend is not so attractive anymore. Even, I don't know how everybody feels about this, but trying to watch a physical simulacrum of a fashion show isn't that interesting on online. So I think there's been a lot more direct talking, which is so interesting as well. Communication can now be talking about what you do, showing what you do, as well as showing the, you know, lookbooks. I'm so sorry about this. I think
I was crippled with similar yesterday thanks to the pollen. So
I've been out. Yeah, that's probably it. So sorry, everybody. I'll try and control it. Talk You talk.
I will. Well,
Mhm.
you actually, in what you've just said, come very well to my next question, which was, so you're mentioning things like decentralization.
Yes.
You're also mentioning quite a lot of collaboration. What are the key elements that really matter to emerging talent today?
I think it's purpose and not wanting to do damage in the world.
Right.
And sometimes being, in fact, able to put it right.
Mm, mm. And then if we were to look and kind of take that, compare that to 10 years ago when you and I first met. So I don't want to speak for the emerging talents back then, but certainly I always thought that the trajectory and the dream for designers back then was probably a really strong wholesale business, perhaps creative director of a big luxury brand, collaboration with a big high street brand. I feel like that's all been turned on its head. So how will that affect the industry as a whole?
So the idea of collaboration.
Well, no, the idea that if purpose and sustainability are now the key factors that are most important to emerging talent, rather than what it used to be, which was that trajectory of wanting to be creative director at a big luxury brand, hosting a catwalk show. How will that affect the industry as a whole if the emerging talent are coming through with different desires and wishes?
Yes, that's so interesting because, you know, in the history of fashion, what we've been through in the past 20 years, of course, is globalization. And there was a point where young British designers, all young designers could sell immediately to the world, which led to the growth of a luxury environment, which was, yes, positive on the one hand, but then it kind of sped everything up so dreadfully. And there was too much being produced. I'm not just saying for the younger designers, but then meanwhile, wholesale started to collapse. You know, the big department stores in America, who were buying the previous tranche of designers have had difficulties or gone into bankruptcy, for instance. I mean, that's been a huge impact. And meanwhile, I think the idea, I think ambition has changed. The idea, I think also younger generations look at what's happened to people who are a bit older than them and realize, wow, maybe that's not not what I want, because of the churning of creative directors at fashion houses. I mean, it's become very I find it very hard to report on how, you know, the changeovers, the speed of the changeovers of creative directors at houses, which always seems like, you know, you don't have enough time to actually do anything before you're got rid of, and then there's news about the next person and all that sort of thing. So, and I do know for a fact that a lot of young people have gone to work as interns in the big conglomerates and come back saying, I don't want to do that.
Wow.
Because of the waste they've seen, for instance, or the fact that they, yes, they just don't want that lifestyle. So, I mean, so many things have changed. Nevertheless, I mean, there's still so many. I think we're talking about creativity, I think, in this talk, this discussion. The idea of creativity has expanded or changed and morphed from what your clothes look like to inventing new ways of doing business, new ways of living. And that's just incredibly exciting. And those actually are the lessons that I would say that corporations need to take on board. I mean, I very much believe in the idea of reverse mentorship. I mean, as I said, I'm incredibly humbled and I learned so much from the very youngest people, I mean, people in their first year at university or even before, what they're saying and what their education has been through school equips them to know so much more about what this word sustainability is, and also, you know, equal rights, and not, as I said, not doing any damage. So I think there's this fount of knowledge amongst young people, and sort of elders who didn't have that education do need to turn around and listen to them. There should be a much greater generational exchange, and that's something I find hopeful.
Yeah, because you've actually, I was going to ask you, you know, the industry over the last 12 months, there are these examples of small, independent, mid-sized businesses that have done very well. They've got a very good relationship with their customer in the last 12 months. But then on the other end of the scale, the high street's transformed. There have been so many businesses going to administration. Mm-hmm. And so I was going to say, how can the industry as a whole learn from young creatives? And it clearly, for you, it's in that listening aspect and ideally collaboration, right?
Yes. Okay, so when I started at the BFC, it was mid-aughts, or just the beginning, before I took on the role that I have now. Collaboration was all about, you know, having what we call now drop, I suppose, designing collections for the high street, and you would get fees from that. I mean, I think now the idea of collaboration, when I see designers, you know, like Phoebe English or Bethany Williams or any number of people, Paolo Casano, lots of young people, they have far more knowledge than just designing clothes. So I think the collaboration should now actually be thought of in terms of taking young people on as advisors. I mean, why can't companies pay to have a sort of sounding board internally? I say pay because paying is real, and that's something that the industry tends to forget. They think that ideas are free to be harvested from young people, and that's wrong. But yes, I think that, you know, there are so many ways in which young people can patchwork their careers together, and that big corporations can think of involving them in a real way, because they're the intelligence, they're the intel, and there are things that you can't know when you're sitting, you know, on the 14th floor in your little in your little hutch, trying to work out what trends are on through a screen.
Mm-hmm. And if we are, well, when talking of through a screen, and I do think that something that you mentioned right from the off in this discussion is this new generation are very good at collaborating amongst themselves, and perhaps teaming up with a filmmaker that might be at the same unit college as them, or finding a great way to convey their message through imagery. And they are actually very well equipped, as we mentioned, for this online world that we're all having to use as the showcase for collections and for our work. This is something that I know really interests our community and our members. FashMash was founded way back when, around the time of our Queen live stream with Nick Knight and Show Studio, to the sounds of Lady Gaga. But, you know, things in many ways, have they changed that much, Sarah? Because, you know, you mentioned at the beginning that watching a catwalk show just as a film, it's not very compelling. And I would love to get your take on the designers that really have made this shift to digital work for them and made it a compelling proposition.
It's really interesting what you say about having communities of people who have many talents under their umbrella. So somebody, I would say, Saul Nash, is a young designer in London who's a choreographer as well. He went to Royal College of Art. He's a choreographer, and his boyfriend is a filmmaker. And he's made this incredible film called Twist, which I absolutely urge everybody to see if they haven't seen it. It would change your life to see it. He's now, Saul's just been announced as one of the LVMH semi-finalists, so thrilled about that. He's someone who else has made that that shift really well. Do you mean people who've made great films?
That was really what I was thinking. And ones that for you, because also I'm very interested in for you as a reviewer as well, there must be aspects that you love, because you're able to have these very intimate one-on-one conversations with the designer, rather than a kind of race backstage and it's always a bit of a bun fight. So are there elements that have worked very well for you too as a reviewer?
Well, I mean, it's completely changed my life and the way I work, because I'm in here. But for every review now, I seem to have an hour's conversation with the designers, whereas where people can unpack and talk about all sorts of things, as opposed to the scrum that used to happen backstage, which was absolutely horrendous for everybody. There'd be the designer there with, 50 reviewers sticking their phones in their faces, and obviously at the max stress time, then everybody runs away. So there's tons more content now to write about. So actually, the reviews are getting longer and longer. I don't know if anybody's reading them, but and also there's much more to talk about. It's not just in the old way, what's the hemline and what's the color and what's the trend. It's what are you making that clothes? What are you making those clothes of? How do you make them? And how are you distributing them? And also, people are talking much more about values. The absolute leader in all of this is not a young designer, or however, he was one of our young designers through New Gen only 10 years ago, J.W. Anderson.
Yeah.
He's used his both J.W. Anderson platform and Loewe to be a sort of, it's like a rolling festival of arts. So you get to meet artists you didn't know about. You get to read. You get to. I go down so many rabbit holes now, which has been wonderful, because for everybody really, the access to ideas and philosophies and things that are going on in the real world are that's an opportunity. And Jonathan also, if you look at what he's doing on those websites, he's now realized that he wants to talk to his customer, so he will actually, there are videos also on these sites where he just talks about what he did with the collection. It's great. So it's not just people like me that has to be filtered through. So I think that's he's adapted so incredibly well to that. Also, when you go to the website, you do really want those trainers that he's doing. So he very elegantly manages to patch in the merchandise with this idea of a rolling festival. And this is something else I see. Sorry, I'm tangenting now. As you know, I always tangent.
Oh, I love it.
The dissolution of the dissolving of fashion weeks.
Yeah.
So you just said that I've been reviewing for the ready to wear in the London, Paris, Milan, blah blah. I haven't stopped since January.
Wow.
Apart from lying on my bed watching Netflix, as we all do. The rest of the time I've been we've all been incredibly busy, because designers, brands want their own space in which to do things. And so, you know, as you know, it's not just the idea of packing together in, you know, 8 shows a day.
Yeah.
Doesn't really make any sense from, you know, having the attention of people, but also it, I feel that people should only do what they really believe in when they have something to say. Make it an event, maybe not just even every 6 months, every year, and whenever you feel like it. So I think that's, you know, that's a pattern that's probably not going to go away.
I found it really interesting. One of our mutual favorites, Michael Halpin,
Mm.
it's such a beautiful, relevant film
Yeah.
in September. And then this February chose just to put out a lookbook because that was appropriate for him.
Yeah, there are no rules anymore. But I think when you're talking about Michael, actually that film is the best thing that he's ever done, because it, you know, I don't know if everybody knows, but he cast women who you know, worked for London Transport, a lady who was a cleaner in Homerton Hospital, I think, and a gynecologist. And it was, and apart from dressing them up in this most incredible way in clothes that they loved and they looked amazing in, they also got to speak. So, you know, it really showed you know, Michael's good heart and his, you know, what he believes in, as well as fronting those women, those incredible women.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, there's no need to I think getting, for the whole of fashion, really getting away from the addiction of the catwalk has to be a good thing. I'm not sweeping catwalks away. I mean, eventually there will be gatherings, but different kinds of gatherings, perhaps.
And if there are clear benefits both for on all sides of the industry to this dismantling of Fashion Week that we're discussing, what are the elements that you miss?
Yeah, I miss seeing clothes up close and being able to touch them and see things in 3D. I don't miss parties. I don't. Yeah, but like everybody, I miss seeing friends.
Of course. So I suppose then the next key aspect that keeps coming up throughout this discussion, Sarah, is that of sustainability. And this is something that I've really noticed. And you know, you mentioned, by the way, you were like, I don't think many people are reading the reviews right now. Really interesting. All of my peers that I'm speaking to were actually reading the reviews far more than we would have done before.
Oh, great.
I think there's so much meatier. And because personally, I'm finding, like you said, the fashion film, it's not necessarily always working for every designer. A review can be really evocative. So the resounding theme that I'm seeing from so many of your reviews is that of sustainability, but also everything from kind of localism to ethics. They are now at the forefront of these designers' minds. So on the grounds that we're in a climate emergency, how can big brands employ the passion and expertise of the young talent coming through? I know you mentioned Stella McCartney had a brilliant team up going on.
Okay, so taking the first part of your question, in many ways, young creative people are the waste recyclers of the industry. That's their potential. Okay, so already for the past, I mean, this is something that really is why people should take notice of what young people say. So 5 years ago already, as I said, I was you know, we're hitting this thing of young designers, young people not wanting to work for conglomerates because of the waste. Designers such as Priya Ahluwalia, who just, you know, won the Queen Elizabeth II award for a young creative designer. She, for instance, went to the two sides of her family. She's British, London girl, Nigerian, Indian. went to Nigeria to visit family, went to India to visit family, and then saw and witnessed the dumping of the West's, excess thrown away fast fashion on those countries, and came back and resolved that she would never contribute to that. She would always upcycle and find ways, sophisticated ways of working. Okay, so rolling on from that, I think there are really interesting things happening now, so that there's a potential for young people to solve the problems that bigger companies have. So if you look at what Sarah Burton's done at Alexander McQueen, she's somebody I know very well. She's incredibly discreet, as you know, but she's embedded education into what the company does. So since 2019, she's been donating surplus fabric, fabric which is left over, and because what happens is when production is over, the fabric's bought first of all, that the production's over, there are warehouses and warehouses. I'm not just talking about McQueen, I'm talking about for the whole industry across in France and Italy, of materials which well, some people burn it. McQueen's never thrown anything away. Anyway, so Sarah decided that she would wanted to just distribute them to I think something like 30 universities and community textiles initiatives all over the country. And she's just done a second delivery of that, whilst also involving the people in the company, not just the designers, in reaching out and setting projects, wanting nothing back. And so that's, in the ecosystem of Alexander McQueen, that's something that's just so incredibly beneficial. Burberry have also started to distribute their surplus fabric again to young people. So in a way, a virtuous circle can start to happen.
And you've actually, obviously we talk about sustainable fashion. We all know that this is an oxymoron. Have you encountered graduates? You mentioned Priya earlier, who has such awareness of surplus fabric and excess fabric and not wanting to produce more fabric or use virgin materials. Yeah. But have you encountered any who are so aware of the plight of the planet that they actually decide to remove themselves from creativity and the very notion of producing more? Are they almost completely turned off by the idea?
Well, yeah. I mean, there many young people before even the pandemic happened, who so when they start to discover what's the reality is, are completely turned off and drop out. Yeah. Yes. However, that doesn't that means that they perhaps are also clustering in other emerging paradigms of mending.
Yeah.
Mending and swapping, renting, all these things. It doesn't mean that you have to be a hermit necessarily. Different forms of localism can come into it, which yeah, I think something else, which, I mean, looking at Bethany Williams, her business is really, she's a social worker in actual fact.
Yeah, very true.
Her point is that the work that she does, she employs ex-offenders, and works with the Magpie Trust in the East End for undocumented refugees and their mothers and children, and through that, that's. And I think, again, she's bigger than just making clothes. Through that, she's shone lights on corners of our society, which people wouldn't know about, and people need to maybe donate to without buying. So I think, you know, examples like that, she's just extraordinary, Bethany. I mean, the young women in this scenario are just, I mean, I say absolutely humbling. When you look at what the Emergency Designer Network did during the pandemic, so that's Phoebe, Bethany, and Holly Fulton and Cosette McCreary, right after being rejected by the government. Never, you know, everybody applied to the government portal to join in, to offer their services to produce PPE, never got an answer. So what did they do? They started their own network, not just making, not just sourcing, also working directly with doctors and physicians and hospitals, and also evolving specs and ways of making PPE which are not disposable, which can be laundered. I mean, there's a whole template set out there, which has basically been ignored by the government because I don't know, I'm tangent, I'm going again, but I'm off on one again. But you know, there's the huge terrible environmental impact of PPE, disposable PPE in this country and the world is hideous. So, sorry, I'm off. So this idea of making clothes or making things for a purpose and taking care of the community and the environment and society, I think that's a purpose that I idealistically, no, it's not a dream. I've seen it, you know, I've seen it happen, seeing it happening.
And it wasn't a tangent at all, because I was going to ask you about collaboration and creative collaboration, in light of the Emergency Designer Network, who we actually interviewed for FashMash this time next week. We were our first online Pioneers speakers.
Okay.
And I was wondering if you think it will continue post-pandemic, because what I found slightly on a community basis is that in the first lockdown, neighbours and community were all very helpful, but slightly in the winter lockdown, everybody's hunkered down, and it certainly does feel less collaborative, less community spirit. Industry-wide, do you think we can hope that this more sharing spirit that has come about over the pandemic will last and will endure?
Well, I don't know what is post-pandemic. I mean,
so true.
And you know, what's normal? I think we don't want normality if we think we're going to reverse to what 2019 was. I think it's about everybody taking responsibility, right? Wherever you are, whatever influence you have within a corporation, everybody has to do their bit. Influencing upwards, downwards, sideways, outwards. You know, we're all, it can't be anymore. The fashion industry cannot anymore be just focused on profit at, you know, at all costs. And I think good companies understand that, because I don't work within with any, you know, an industrial level within any brands or anything. I can't say that for a fact. You know, it's that old thing of you have to be the change, don't you?
Yeah. And there was one quote, and then I want to, I'm actually, this works quite well. So I loved your Hope article in Vogue last August. And I think the reason I found it one of them just so optimistic is because of your work with young talent. And that must be a huge benefit of being able to talk to them, that it does imbue optimism with you. And you mentioned, in light of this kind of linear model of the traditional industry that is based on persuading people to buy more, you mentioned that this should be from a new place of honesty. And I would love to know from you who you think commits to that transparency very well, and what are its characteristics, this new place of honesty?
It's really a big question, and now of course I can't think of any. Gabriella Hurst is somebody I really, really admire. I find it incredibly, she's a straight talker, and she's methodically made her operations so transparent at you know, the luxury level, and now she's working at Chloe. That's just amazing. Who else? Well, you know, it's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
But you know what I find so extraordinary is that the entire luxury industry is really focused on always on youth, right?
Yeah.
So it can't afford to have this huge disconnect. So I mean, I now you put me on the spot. I can't actually think of. I can think of lots of positive things that are happening. Okay, this is not an example of transparency, but it's an example of a huge company embracing young people and empowering them. Gucci, Alessandro Michele, he had a Gucci Fest, which was giving money to, I think something like, I don't know how many was, 8 or 10 designers to make films, which was shown in the same time period. They're probably still online, as his own show. So I mean, I think that's a good. That was nice. That was really great. And I just hope that people don't. Also, I think, right, you can't do it as a one-off. You can't do it as a PR stunt. Yeah. Because that is not going to work anymore, because I do think people are looking for entities they can trust, right?
Yeah.
And we don't. I mean, I think there's so much in fashion which is predicated on everybody having an incredibly short attention span. But I know with my mind, the things which have stuck in my mind have been the outstanding people who've done things differently, small and large, and the rest is forgettable. It's the things which just sort of business as usual which are forgettable.
Mm. And then of course that goes back perfectly to what we were saying earlier about this idea of returning to normal. What is normal? What is business as usual now? And it's not necessarily a place to which we want to return. Or in my case it's not, and I know it. And so just while we are on this idea of hope as our final point here before we go to questions from the floor, have your ideas on hope progressed since that letter back in August, and over the course of shows in the last month? For FashMash, we always finish these talks asking our speaker for their hope for the industry. And I really wonder what would be yours now, where we're at, spring 2021.
I really hope that that there's this realization that you know, small is beautiful, smaller is more exciting, that there's a way of living whereby you can buy into something which is doing good for the community. I think that's my hope, and I can think of lots of examples of that I want to buy, but only because I do think now that people are going to be much more careful about where they place their money, and for you know, consumers to realize that you know, you're citizens, you're not consumers. I hate that, you know, that term. We need to challenge the language. Every pound you spend, what are you investing in? I think that's my hope, and that's what I'll keep on trying to sort of push from behind.
Well, I have every faith that you achieve that. I know that you have a really forceful and brilliant way of discussing these matters, both on a very high level and with designers who are emerging. Right, Sarah, I'm going to pass you over to Rachel now for some Q&A, which I've seen coming in through the course of our talk, and then we will finish up with a quick fire round.
Thank you, Rosanna.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Rosanna, and thank you, Sarah. That was so insightful and so interesting. We've had a couple of questions in, and I would just extend to anybody else listening, if you have some questions, now is a prime time to have access to somebody that you wouldn't normally. So please do pop them in the Q&A box. I'm going to start. I love this question from Jamie. Jamie says, what can PR and communication professionals do to support the long-term growth of young designers and creative talents?
Are we talking about in terms of agencies, or?
I'm going to assume this is, it could be either, I suppose, people that are, within a PR agency or indeed in-house, but let's maybe go with the agency, because that would potentially look wider than one individual brand.
Well, to be honest,
to have support across the industry.
It's all about advice. I mean, the role of PRs now has really changed. I mean, I'm inundated here. My house is absolutely stacked full of extraneous material that's been sent out to me, which I don't know how to dispose of. That's one thing that PRs need to know. I think that being a PR, the best PRs I know are advisors and mentors to young people. They advise them on. They don't push them into contracts with. They oversee contracts with. They police kind of what's going to be happening. They stand between the designer and the client in a way. Then the negotiators, they make sure that just please make sure that that young people's young people's interests are taken care of and that they get paid.
Yeah, indeed, that pay part again. And I presume that piece you were saying previously as well around the idea of doing something different and a PR person helping to bring those stories out, right? Because is that the way that someone would gain your attention, for instance?
The PRs that I trust are people who will tell me the truth, who don't try to bully. There are people who try to bully. There are people who try to say, if you do this, then then you can have that. I mean, actually, I don't necessarily fall into that that type of a target, because I do what I like, more or less. I think, yes, writing a press release. That's something that is a dying art, I think. And building confidence and getting, what you have to do is to sort of see what that person's talents are and enhance them. I mean, PR, I think, it's that's another industry that's changing. We're all changing in communications. Yeah,
hugely changing as well. But it's really interesting to hear, because it sounds as though there's a bit of balance there between the more traditional parts, it's the relationships, the press release, etc., but also I guess finding those parts of things that are interesting are going to stand out in all of that, which is ultimately what those job roles have always been about, haven't they?
So, we all have to educate ourselves on the language of sustainability. There are many people who just don't know what they're talking about. So you've got to be absolutely sure that you have the facts right. There's really a job for PRs to do. And one thing I will recommend actually is Condé Nast started during the pandemic a sustainability glossary, which is open access, and it's an encyclopedia of knowledge that you can find. So you can't have people throwing around organic or sustainable, or you really have to make sure that people are prepped to talk about it in a truthful way.
Yeah, you have to substantiate the claims, I suppose. Yeah, that's super interesting. Okay, so we have Alex McKay. So Alex himself is a young designer and a founder of an emerging sustainable luxury brand. He's on a mission to educate customers and disrupt the destructive fashion industry. He's reaching out with his contact details, but as a question, he's been actively seeking investment to launch his brand and to secure London-based stockists, and just looking for advice essentially around how to go about securing funding as a emerging designer.
Well, the whole issue of investment is is something which is, you know, the due diligence on who you're going to be getting into bed with is absolutely critical. I'm not sure that there's that much money around. There's always a price to it. All I can say is that, you know, the kind of ladder that we've created at the British Fashion Council has worked in the past, going through various stages of sponsorship. I'm sorry, Alex, I don't have the answer to that. We should probably talk.
It's a very hard question, and I'm sure it's one that many people think about. It's actually one we've been talking about at FashMash, that we should bring an investment specialist on for exactly that reason, because so many of our audience are indeed looking for funding and looking how to grow. So maybe we'll do exactly that. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, one final question from Ashedzi. She says, do you find emerging designers prioritize social media over traditional media now? And maybe as an extension on that from me, what's your view on that angle?
I think it's a blend. I think, you know, yes, TikTok and Instagram, of course, are hugely the first thing that lots of people think about, but you know, they're just as delighted to have a feature in a magazine or a newspaper. So it's a blend. I mean, obviously through social media, you're actually talking to people who might buy, so you can skip out so many different barriers if you're lucky enough.
Yeah, indeed. Have you seen instances, I suppose, where having a large social media following is ultimately very beneficial for an emerging designer before they perhaps at the more traditional stage of the design journey?
There's a boy called Stephen Stokey Daly who's literally just graduated from Westminster University in menswear, and he's in Liverpool designing and making in his mother's house. The whole family is involved. And his work was Harry Lambert, the stylist, put all of his collection onto Harry Styles, and his social media following has absolutely boomed. But at the same time, Stephen is very focused on making clothes out of vintage materials and getting people to, which they're very willing to do, pay up front and wait. So I mean, that's a beautiful combination. I mean, the idea that you have to go faster and faster and bigger, it's always step by step, and you know, being very careful. And most people I know have another job as well.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's interesting though, as you say, there is a very interesting blend there happening, isn't it, of like all of these new things that we need to focus on, but also all these designers are focusing on and bringing, but also some nice traditional things in there, like celebrity placement ultimately, you know, does really work, especially when there's a good story behind it, as you mentioned with this particular example, which I didn't know. I have to look that one up.
Pay for Harry Styles.
Yeah, that probably helps as well.
Yeah, I don't know.
Fantastic. Great. Well, I'm going to pass back to Rosanna, but just quickly before I do, two things. One, we have a lovely comment from Holly McGlynn that I'm just going to read out because it's so nice. She says, thank you so much for such a wonderful talk. It's very inspiring to see someone with so much influence and experience in the industry championing change. So thank you, Holly, for that. Really lovely. And then just a quick note from me before we close out, just thank you to everyone for being here, and thank you also to our sponsor Klaviyo once more. We're also delighted as FashMash to announce that next month we will host Aisha Barenblatt, the founder and CEO of Remake and the brains behind the Pay Up campaign, which has been supporting garment workers around the world during the pandemic, one of the most important movements we've seen over the past year. And that's going to take place during Fashion Revolution Week, so on April 20th. Please do pop it in your diaries, and look out for the invitation to get your ticket from us next week. That will be coming to you shortly. And I will now say thank you so much, Sarah, and I'll pass over to Rosanna to do one final goodbye.
And thank you for donating to Southall Black Sisters.
Yeah, that's actually I was about to say the same. Thank you everyone to donating to that very, very relevant cause right now. I was really pleased when you chose it, Sarah, so thank you. Right then, to finish up, it's a quick fire. Sarah, I would like your instant response, knee-jerk reaction, quick as you can to
Okay.
these. Right, first one. Vintage find or new collection?
Oh, vintage find.
1990 new gen or 2020 talent?
Oh, I mean, 2020, we have to live in the present, don't we? We can only live in the present.
Well said, well said. One-on-one Zoom interview or the race backstage? I think I already know.
Oh, zooming, zoom. Oh, yes.
Dinner for 6 in the garden or a glitzy cocktail party for 60 after show?
Oh, the first.
And now we can have dinners for 6 in the garden. It's so exciting.
Though I do miss Port Eliot Festival and everything we did there. So in my mind, I'm planning, some sort of great fashion gathering, which is a picnic, something like that.
Please tell me as soon as you've got those plans in place, because Port Eliot was amazing a few years ago. Very, very fond memories. Okay, the final one. 2021 or 2031?
2021. This is a revolutionary year. If I'm alive in 2030, I'll look back on it and think, wow, what happened there and what changed? It's the point of history. So things are changing now, which haven't changed for a generation. So no, but I want to be alive in 2030 to see whatever grandchildren I might be blessed with.
That's such a positive note on which to end. Sarah, I always find it sad now that we can't go and all have a drink together and have the audience join us as well. But here's to being able to do that in the future. And thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.